This entire devotional series is about leaves because after all, it's fall. And this second one is called Fading Leaves. And here's the verse. But rebels and sinners will both be broken, and those who forsake the Lord will perish. You will be ashamed because of the sacred oaks in which you delighted. You will be disgraced because of the gardens you have chosen, and you will be like an oak with fading leaves, like a garden without water. That's from Isaiah 1. So we read about those that rebel and forsake God, and interestingly, in this passage, we read about sacred oaks that brought delight, and then a couple of verses later, the people are told they'll be like oaks that have fading leaves, a garden without water. So let's consider the sacred oaks. Groves in ancient times were places where idol worship took place. Many were oak groves in high places, and it's where the people became addicted to worshiping things other than God. So in other words, they were finding their delight in something other than God and forsaking Him. If we read the verses prior to these, we read how God's children rebelled, they turned their backs on Him and did all sorts of evil. And because of this, their country became desolate and stripped by foreigners. And then God says something so forceful, He's not pleased with their sacrifices, and He even hides Himself from their prayers. Last time we talked about how the first couple hid themselves from God because of their shame, and now God is talking of hiding Himself from His people because of their detestable and meaningless offerings. Why was God so upset with His people? He wanted them to defend the oppressed and seek justice, and to take up the cause of the fatherless and plead the case of the widow. And He gives them a promise in His great compassion. If they're willing and obedient, good stuff will be eaten from the land. God always has a promise for those who choose to obey, a promise of life and not death. Then we come to the verse today. They will be ashamed because of the sacred oaks and gardens where they chose to delight themselves. There's the mention of a garden again. Remember how God provided everything in the original garden for His creation, and yet they chose to disobey. And here it's happening again. The people are so bold that they've created their own gardens and trees where they went to worship other things than God. And this grieved God's heart so much. The very oaks under which they were worshiping would have fading leaves and no water in the garden. I think those of us that have oak trees on our property are extremely sad when signs of disease occur. Yellow leaves and loss of foliage are signs of a dying tree. If seriously affected, the tree has to be removed. However, those slightly affected can be monitored and nourished back to health. And once oak wilt sets in, well, the tree is just pretty much gone. Oak wilt is a fungus, and what it does is it disables the water connecting system of the tree, and it's deadly. So oak wilt in this story is setting up high places of worship of other things apart from God. It's also blatantly taking God's provision, trees and gardens of plenty, and hoarding it for ourselves instead of seeking the good for others. It's the opposite of compassion. So the first sign of a damaged oak tree is fading leaves. And guess what? This disease can spread to other trees, especially trees that have been wounded or pruned. Oak wilt can kill an entire grove in a matter of months. While this warning from God might appear harsh to those that read it, it's actually merciful. To keep their evil from spreading, He's going to cut it off with fading leaves and no water in the garden. If you read the following chapter, if the people turn away and turn back to God, then there will be this call to the mountain of the Lord to walk in His paths and in the light of the Lord. No more fig leaves for covering, no more oak wilt that spreads and kills. And then there's a verse I love that says this: the arrogance of man will be brought low, and human pride humbled. The Lord alone will be exalted in that day, and the idols will totally disappear. Arrogance causes us to turn away from God, set up our own gardens and sustenance apart from Him, and we begin to lose our eyes of compassion for others. And that's when the leaves start to fade.